Cheeseburger. You're listening to the 3 Count Podcast.
Do you want to get live with me? Do you really want to ride with me? I'm in the club, baby, grind on me. Do you want to get live with me?
Welcome, everybody, to another great edition of the 3 Count Podcast, which ends now into the ring. And I'm your host, Clifford Red Dog Miller, the man that leads you up that mountain called wrestling. But, it's our 350th episode, so, we have to do it big. And, like every good Sherpa, you got to have someone who's been there, done that, and can do it more efficient. You can. That's why it's never about me. It's about who's entering the ring. So who's entering the ring today? You can find this person at the Wrestling Independent. You can find him at Labor of Love and NJPW. You can find him at ICW, Ring of Honor, PWE, GCW, Fight, Wrestling Open, Wrestling Pro, AEW, Flying V, and that is just this year. He is a traveler. He is a trainer. He is a mentor. Some would even say he is their friend and brother. He is also the drip god. He is the rhythm. He is the world famous Cheeseburger.
Yeah, that was a hell of an intro right there.
Hey, I appreciate that.
How are you doing?
I'm good, man. So we met at the Wrestling Independent, and I was, we're sitting there selling merch and stuff, and I just happened to be sat next to you, and I was like, full transparency when I tell people this, like, I'm a super fan, like I'm a massive fan of yours, and I was like, I need to get them on my show, so I was like, I'm just gonna shoot for the shot and hope things work out.
Hey, you always gotta just go for it. Worst thing someone can say is no,
Yeah, that's what, and I think about that a lot too when I'm like talking to people. I'm like, I don't want to hear no, so I'm like, I just need to meet somebody first and then like introduce myself, because I feel like I put out the energy. I'm like, yeah, I genuinely want you on the show, because there's a million wrestlers out there, and I'm like, this is our 350th episode, so it's like I got to go pick out the people that I want to have and bring them on and have a discussion with them.
Absolutely, yeah. I appreciate you for reaching out, taking the chance to chat with me and ask me to do this, and yeah, here we are.
So you've been in this for 11 years, going into your 12th year, and I'm what are how did you get started, and how did you find your way into the business, and like what drew you in?
I was a fan since I was a kid. I started watching around like when SmackDown began, and it was through my dad that I became a fan. Like I would go over his house, and we'd always like check it out, watch wrestling together, and that was just kind of like that bond that we had. And it was something that I always liked as a kid. I started falling out of it when I got into like my high school years. I feel like everyone kind of has that point where they start getting older, and they're like, "Oh, wrestling's not that cool anymore." Blah blah blah. Where they have that phase as a fan where they stop watching. But yeah, I stopped watching for a couple of years from like 06, like 09, and I happened to catch it in like early 2010. And I was like, oh, I haven't watched wrestling in like years. And remember why I fell in love with it. And yeah, once I fell in love with it that second time, I just like all in, just like watching. And I discovered that the Ring of Honor school was nearby me. And I was like, oh, like, love wrestling, and I'm looking for something to do, between, that weird period of high school where you have to figure out what you're going to do for the rest of your life, when you're like 16, 17. So I was 17 years old. I went to check out the Ring of Honor school, and they were about 10 minutes from my house. Went with my parents. They liked it. I liked it. And I decided to sign up when I was 17 years old in 2010. And yeah, started my training with the Ring of Honor school, and it was a long journey from then on.
It's interesting to hear everybody's like journeys and stuff like that, and how they got in and how they found it. And it's one of those things where it's like wrestling is one of those things that like teaches you like so much about like just about life, because like unfortunately, like there are some pitfalls. This we tell everybody like
Absolutely.
this is a job. It's a fun job, but it's a job nonetheless. And like you're responsible for your career. So if you're not going anywhere, it's really on you. And then you learn that through like the storytelling of like wrestlers like trying to make it into business, but then you're also learning it like in WWE, right? We look at people like John Cena, right, where he starts off, he's this like ruthless aggression wrestler, and then you find out like behind the scenes that it's not really clicking, and WWE's like on the brink of like cutting him, and they're like, well, let's just throw this rapper gimmick at him and see what happens. And then he just blows up, and then you like understand the journey of like how he transforms his character and stuff like that. It's fun to watch people like learn to go about things, and then you get to genuinely be excited with them on their journey.
Yeah, peaks and valleys throughout the career. You're gonna have those highs, you're gonna have those lows. You're gonna have times where you want to quit, and you're gonna have times when things are going great and everyone loves you, and then you're gonna feel like the world, like you're gonna have other days where you feel like the world's like crashing in on you, and you're like all alone, and everything in between. But yeah, peaks and valleys are kind of what makes the journey. I don't know if I want to say like special, but I'll say interesting. Those like good moments and bad moments, but we always hope to have more good than bad over the course of a career for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I know for me, it was funny
Mhm.
because like I started my journey in January of 2020, and this is like after having
Mm.
like a whole other
You
life,
picked
like
the interesting month to start with everything that happened 2 months later.
right. So we had the whole national shutdown, and I was like, well, I still want to continue this wrestling thing, but I was like, I'm kind of being told. I felt like the world was telling me like, nah, this or the universe was like, nah, this isn't for you. And I was like, well, maybe. So I like started watching like wrestling videos, and shout out to Joey Munoz and the Santino brothers over in California for putting out their video and me finding just stumbling on their channel.
Oh
And I
yeah, they're a
started
great crew.
watching wrestling through them to learn how to wrestle.
Hmm.
And then in May, when everything opened back up a little bit in Maryland, I was like, "Cool, let me dig around, let me go learn and figure it out." And then I got injured, and I was like, "Maybe this is really the universe telling me like not to do
Oh
this." And I was like,
yeah.
"I'll keep pushing. We'll see what happens."
Did you end up going to like a formal school, or you kind of like self taught?
So I went to a formal school. Well, like a lot of people will go back and forth with it, but my trainer is actually Sicken, out of
Oh,
Nick.
Delaware?
Yeah, no,
Oh,
he's out of Sykesville, Maryland,
Maryland.
actually.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that was my trainer, and
Okay.
then, even he told me, he was like, "In May, like, I took a step back, but obviously because, like, the pandemic and stuff." And then, like, he's like, "And then all of a sudden I watched you just, like, start making leaps and bounds." And I was like, "Yeah,
Mhm.
we're gonna get a match ready." And then, like, I tore my abdomen on a
Oh wow.
three-quarter roll.
Oh damn. Oh, that
And
for
so I was
how
like,
long was the
"Alright."
recovery on that?
And then I came back, and then he was like, "Alright." And then I just took off and just left I felt like I left the world behind when I was like, "Alright, I'm just gonna run and just do
That's
this thing."
crazy for a 3/4 roll.
Yeah, so, because obviously we learn how to do these things because we're telling people like, "Hey, this is the safe way to do it." And for some reason, and I know what happened, I was my, left elbow, right knee, and when I rolled, like, I just twisted myself too hard and then just felt it.
Oh man.
Yep. It was
How long
rough.
was the recovery for that your injury?
It was like 6 to 8 weeks.
How,
Yeah,
oh
it was a
okay.
while, like, I couldn't stand up, I couldn't sit down, it hurt to lay down, it hurt to do anything because obviously abdomen, and so the doc told me, like, I had to take some time off, so I took some time off, and I just went the crazy part, right, I get injured, and I go to the emergency room, I do my thing, and then I come back to practice the next day and just
Oh
sit in a chair, bust out my notebook, and just start taking notes,
no, that's
writing
awesome.
everything down.
That was a big thing for me when I started training. Was I was a very diligent note taker, and like I still have my original notebook from when I started training in 2010, and I still use like a lot of that to go back and reference when I teach classes myself, and like just like remembering the sequencing of like how I learned things, or just something that maybe I forgot that it's like buried in that notebook. But yeah, I keep all my notebooks from when I've been like from my first days of training.
Mm, nice, because I saw so mine's actually sitting, like, right here next to me, and then I have
Mhm,
my second notebook, in my car because it
mhm.
goes everywhere with me as well. It's one of those things, like, I knew I wasn't gonna be good at speaking on the mic because it's not something I'm, like, natural to, and everybody kind of feels that same way, right, with a microphone or in a camera in your face, right? And so one of the things I started doing was, I started jumping on podcasts and, like, talking about wrestling, and then my friend Chaz was like, "Hey, we should do a podcast together." And I was like, "All right, cool." So then we made this podcast, and then I was like, "I want to do an interview show." So I did an interview show, so it
Yeah.
just gets comfortable to talk to people. And I think it's one of those things that when you find your weakness and you want to enhance like your abilities, like you
Mhm.
have to find like ways to like make it work. Otherwise,
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
just you just sound ridiculous sometimes.
No, absolutely. You have to understand, like, not just in wrestling, but just like in any aspect that you want to be good at in life. You have to understand what your weaknesses are and eventually work on those weaknesses if you want to be, you know, if you hope to get to the top of the game in some regard to, or be like really good at like whatever you're planning on doing. So yeah, addressing those weaknesses and being cognizant of that, and cognizant of also like how to fix it, or like who to go to fix it, or like what steps you can take yourself to fix it, or those are the keys to being a good learner and a good student of anything.
And I feel like I've ran into a few of your students actually out and about, like,
Mm.
just all over places, and I feel like the one thing they always say about you is that no matter how good they get at chaining, you always find ways to, like, knot them up.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm always like looking for like new stuff for like tactical wrestling, like chaining, stuff like that to break out and like show them
And
something
it's
in the memory bank.
and it goes back to, like, that understanding, like, your weaknesses and stuff like that. Because like, my notebook is filled with all the information that, like, I've put together for the last few years, and just like you did, you said you were going back, but it goes back to help you go back sometimes, you read something, you're like, "Oh, yeah, I forgot I could do that," or "I
Mhm.
forgot I did that." It's like, I'm gonna have to put that back together and put that back in the arsenal, and I'm like, I have to go back now 'cause I tell people all the time, I was like, "Yo, I have, like, 5 wrestling moves that I can hit cleanly, and I
Mhm.
just I just utilize those, and I forget all the sequences that I put together for them."
Yeah, or the best is when you watch like a match back from like years ago, and you're like, "Wow, that's a cool move. I didn't even realize I like did that. Like I didn't do that sequence in like years." And it's like you're like taking notes for yourself, like for things you forgot that you did for like a couple of years ago.
What is, what's I love asking this question because it's one that gets a lot of people thinking, but what's the worst bump you've taken?
The worst bump I've taken. I wrestled Donovan Dijak in Ring of Honor in Minnesota, and it was like two in like the same match actually. Actually, one more particular than the other. Actually, he would do this like not like a Falcon Arrow, but it's like throwing like suplex thing where he has like suplex like kind of just throws you. Dijak is like giant and like I'm small. I love Dijak. He's always great to work with. But I remember thinking I was like this is years ago. I was like super young at the time. The building was this like high school like gym for Ring of Honor. It was like community center gym with like hardwood floors, and we had these like really thin mats at the time.
Mm.
And I remember pitching the spot to him. I was like, "Oh, we go outside and like, how about like I'll jump on the rail. I'll go for a tornado DT. You like stop me. You give me that throw suplex like onto like on the floor." And we were like, "Oh yeah, that's good." I was just like, "Yeah, this is just a normal thing for me to call." And whenever he gave that to me, I was like, "Oh man, it was completely my idea." And I was like, "Why did I even think about that?" And I remember like I hit that and it was just killed my back. And I already had like this is like a couple of years ago. Like probably like 8, 9 years ago at this point. I had like really bad like sciatica issue in my like left side of my lower back. So I remember like after the show, I was trying to do like ring crew. I could like barely walk. It's like every time I took a step, like just shooting pain up my like lower back. So I'm like, all right, guys, I'm just gonna lay down for like for a bit because this is insane. But yeah, that one always sticks out to me, especially because it was my idea.
It's it's funny because like, I feel like the worst bumps usually come when you call them because 'cause you're like,
Yeah.
"Alright, let me do this, or let me try this." I had Kid Bandit on the show, and he talked about how in the middle of his match, they were outside on the concrete, and he was like, "Yo, give me a power bomb," and they did,
Uh,
and he was like, "Why did I call this?"
yeah, it's like especially when you're young. You think you're just like, oh, this will be fine. Like this is just a thing that'll be okay. And it's like, no, it's definitely not okay.
It's, it's wild though to think that when you're like you're going through your career, right? And you're first in your beginning, like that you're this invincible person. And then as you get older, you look back and you're like, you know what? Like I probably shouldn't have called those things. And so you try to help like somebody else, like, hey, yo, don't do that because you'll regret it later. And they're like, nah. And I'm like, all right, bet. Go find
Mhm.
out for yourself, my guy.
Yeah, 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 absolutely.
Hey, so one of the other questions I love asking people who come on our podcast, right, is what's one of the hardest lessons you've had to learn being in this business?
One of the hardest lessons I had to learn. Oh, that's a tough one. There's a lot of hard lessons. The biggest one I think is definitely just in terms of, this is kind of a broad one, but I guess it's like how to deal with multiple like situations diplomatically, um both positive and negative. Just understanding, one of the biggest lessons my trainer taught me was like knowing like uh how to pick your battles, like what battles are like worth fighting for. So see this a lot of times out here, just like I'll tell this to my students as well. It's like, you can't treat every single like small issue like the world's ending, and like, if it was like, for example, you're wrestling a match, and let's say it's like you're booked for a show, but you're losing in like 5 minutes or something, like 4 or 5 minutes, right? And you're just like, I don't want to do this like show. I don't want to like say something. I feel like I should get more time, or I don't want to like lose. Like I want to look like strong. It's like in the grand scheme of like your wrestling career, and also like this like independent show. Not to like downplay independent wrestling, but it's not. Sometimes we build things up in like our heads bigger than they are. And it's like you're losing at 4 minutes on the show in front of like 20, 25 people. Like it's okay. Like you're gonna be okay. It's okay to like lose. Like it's not that big a deal. Like you can lose the match. It's okay. Um, but if it becomes an issue where it's like, if you're someone that every single time there's like a tiny issue, you raise like a huge deal about it, you raise a huge deal out of it. Then when there's actually something that matters, that actually is a huge deal, like people aren't gonna want to listen to you because they're like, well, such and such just complains about everything. So this is just them complaining about something again. But if you're someone that like, it's not to say like let people like say walk over you or whatever is that, but it's just about treat things to like a certain level of importance, where it's like, if you're the person that like, if there's something that is like a huge deal to you and it like really really matters, and it's like actual like something that is actually worth bringing up with like the promoter or person you have an issue with, then like when you finally do it, people are going to actually take notice, go like, hey, this person like is not someone that complains about everything. So like the fact that they're bringing this up means this issue is important to them and it actually matters. So like I think definitely a lot of people need to understand like pick your battles, and a lot of times if you're losing a match, it's really not that big a deal. Like no one's gonna care in two days, you know.
I think it's one of those things too. It's like we forget that, like, although some people put a lot of weight into this, like
Mhm.
wins and losses don't really matter, right?
Yeah,
Because
because like it's like we're like, not to pull back the curtain, but like it's not real when we win. It's not real when we lose. So like, we like someone else decides who wins and who loses. So it's not like you're like, you losing doesn't mean you're like weak, or like this person could beat you in an actual fight. Like it's not that big a deal. Like the only time it honestly really matters is at the highest level on like TV with the top level people, where it's like, hey, this person like they've been building up on TV for like a long time. They have a fan base of thousands and millions of people, so like it actually matters to them if the person like wins or loses. And sometimes companies make the right decision on who wins or loses. Sometimes they don't. But it's like these indie shows where I'll see like people like politics to like win, or like to like go like to change the finish, or like to, oh, I can't tap out because I need to look strong, or hey, the best is like when someone's like, oh, I'm a champion in this other promotion that's like 8 towns away. It's like, so like the fans of that company are gonna think I look weak if I lose in the match on your show. It's like, dude, it's like it doesn't matter. It's really not that big a deal. Like you agreed to do the job, like show up, do your job to the best of your ability. And the cool part about independent wrestling is that if we say like, if your book, I was explaining to some of my like students, and they, once I like explained to them, they got it, and everything. And I was like, the best thing about independent wrestling is, if you are booked, a 4 minute match, and like you lose and you're not happy or whatever. The best part about independent wrestling is we can decide who we work for. So it's like, hey, I don't want to work for this place. I don't feel valued at this place. You could just say, hey, no thanks. Like I'm good. So it's that's why I don't get the whole independent wrestling like complaining, and like politicking to win belts is hilarious to me as well. That's a good one.
it's funny for me because like I know like in my career, there's definitely a couple promotions that I worked for and like I still want to work for, right? But the problem is like when you go to a promotion and there's a conversation had, right? And you agree to something that's going on and then you're just not used.
Mhm.
And, like, that's the worst. It's like,
Yeah, yeah.
you had me come out here, and then you're just like, "Nah." We went with a different direction. Like, well, you coulda saved me that, 'cause the hour drive or the hour and a half drive I drove here, now I'm sitting in the back, not doing anything, and now
Yeah,
I get
that's a whole different thing. Like where it's like, yeah, if they like had said like, hey, come, like we will use you and like you do something with you, like if you come to the show, like, and then they don't use. That's a whole other thing. That's like that's very wrong in my opinion.
yeah, I know, like, and the thing was is, like yeah, and this also goes back to, like, if you have something to say, don't always say it on social media because like, nobody
Oh yeah, yeah,
like,
that's
that's
another one.
terrible.
That's a big one. Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah, it's like you don't want to. That's something you don't want to like put out there. Things like that. It's like too too many people just want to just like put everything out there on like social media.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
a
I
whole
made
concept.
a I remember when I did it, I was upset with the company, right? And I had been at the company for, like I've been there, like, monthly, right? Like, working for this company, and then I put up on Facebook, and I was just like, "I'm not even mad, I'm just upset." That's it. That's all I put. That was the
You
post,
give them
right?
the disappointed dad talk.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden my DM opens up, and it's the promoter, like, in my DMs, like, asking me and telling me, like, justifying, like, why I wasn't used on the show, right? But I was like, but if you literally scroll up 1 person up, you'll see everything that you wrote. I was like, I was just using what you said. Like, that's the problem. And I'm glad that him and I we got it squashed. But it's
Mm.
like at the same token though, it's like you just like you said, if you're not happy, like and you don't feel like being used, like just don't show up. And I don't
Yeah.
want to say unfortunately for me because I still love that promotion. I ended up moving, so then I don't have to be back at the
Right. Yeah.
promotion.
Yeah. We like you said before, we are our own businesses. We are each our own small business, and we can choose like who we choose to do business with or something. And if it's like a place where you're constantly feeling like screwed over, whether it's because like you're not happy, if you're not being like fulfilled, I should say, in terms of like your creative like vision or like your matches or your match quality or like the quality of opponents that you have to work or the amount of time you're giving, or like even if it's just like the money, or if you're getting screwed over like money, you're not getting what you feel you're worth, or there's always an issue. Is like don't just keep letting these places like do this to you. Like you can choose to say, hey, I'm not gonna work here anymore. You know?
Yeah, and keep it between you and that person. You don't have to
Yes,
like
exactly. Yes, yeah. Keep it between like that's something between you and like the brother. It doesn't need to be like a everything. Yeah, like a something for like everyone to know. Unless it's like obviously something like illegal, maybe then maybe that's okay. But
yeah,
that's a
yeah,
whole.
that yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that's what I get. That's a whole other.
It's a whole other fish that we have to
Yeah,
talk about.
yeah.
So you've been in for 11 years. You've traveled the world all over the place, right? So I just want to know, like, what's one do and one don't of the locker room?
In terms of just in general, like worldwide.
Yeah, just in general.
I think it's just like the biggest thing is I'm very big on this because like well I'll give you two. The first is just like from a whole locker room perspective, like pick up after your guys selves. Like it's not that hard, and like especially when like I have like shows that are run like at the dojo, like people like rent out the dojo for like tapings or whatever. um I just like, I was like, that's all the first thing I tell everyone is like, hey, just like pick up after yourselves, like pick up the water bottles, like the wrist tape, things like that. And also like make sure you have all your personal belongings before you leave. Cause so many times like after shows, like it amazes me that people would just like leave their ring jackets like wherever. Like I'm like, you spent a lot of money on that. Like just don't even care about it. Like they'll leave like gear, like their shoes, like great, like just stuff. Like make sure you have your stuff. Is the biggest thing. Clean up after yourself. The other thing is just like what you hear from like everybody. It's just like if you're new in the locker room, or like if you're not new, if you're just someone that wants to learn, like there's a lot of value in being seen but not heard. You know, so like uh, it's okay like to just kind of sit and like listen, just kind of engage in conversation, obviously. But if you're someone that wants to learn, you have to understand that like you can't just take over the conversation, because then it just becomes a conversation where you're talking and you're not learning. And sometimes like, especially if you don't like read the room also is like another big one. Like a lot of people just like really lack the ability to take on like social cues and like read the room, things like that. And understand that like when you're talking to someone, especially if it's say like a veteran or something like that, or like someone that's maybe like a name, but maybe they, just their first time meeting you or stuff like that. Maybe you're kind of like in one of those situations where like everyone's kind of like a circle, like just kind of like chatting, just like, shooting the breeze, whatever it may be. Sometimes like the thing, like, if you're a new guy, like the joke, you think it's like going to be super funny and like pop the room and you like say it. Then instead of getting like a laugh, you're just kind of getting a look of like, who's this guy? Like, you never want to, anytime you ever get that reaction from someone where it's like, no matter who it is, where like you say something and they kind of look at you and like look at someone else like, who's this guy? It's like 99% of the time, it's always like a negative reaction. It's the worst. It's never like, hey, who's this guy? This guy's like awesome. Like, I like this guy. It's like, who's this guy? Like, let this guy in. Like, why is he here? Oh, so there's a lot of power being seen, not heard. You never want to be the who's this guy of someone.
Yeah, it's one of those things like I when I go to like the open, right, the wrestling open, I
Mm,
like always I pop in and I may not even be booked for the show. I just pop in like all the time, but I'll like walk around, say what's up to everybody, and then like if you happen to be calling your match or if you're like just in conversation with somebody else, I may stop in and just give you a quick fist bump and then just keep it moving because I'm like I don't want to interrupt whatever you got going on, and then I'll stand off to the side and then have conversations with other people who are just kind of open, but it is very awkward to watch someone just like stand there and just like wait to say what's up instead of just
yeah,
like just catch up with me in a couple minutes, man. Like
I,
it'll
I
be
think,
okay.
yeah, you have to, there's like a fine line between being personable and being annoying. And a lot of people don't know where that line is. And that line is different for a lot of people. And it's different for, I may have a lot more patience for someone kind of like talking my ear off than like say like I don't know, like someone that's been on TV like in WWE for like 20 years and is just like old and tired and just wants to get to their hotel room and sleep, for example. Like, so like you have but that's what I was saying, like where it comes to like picking up social cues and like say, hey, this person's not busy right now. I can go and say what's up and maybe like chat, like ask them a question or two. Or it's like, hey, this person's like clearly talking to a group of people and they're clearly busy and engaged in conversation. So maybe this is not the time to go up and like interrupt and like try and get my funny joke off and things like that. So like, yeah, it's just all about kind of people like being self-aware and like understanding like, hey, right time, right place to do this. Yeah.
Yeah, timing is key, and it goes with that like not just in life, but also in wrestling. Like timing is key. Like you
Mm,
gotta that is something like I'm still like really adamant in learning and like understanding is like timing and where like to place things in certain parts of like your mat and just kind of
mm,
like understanding and then also like it's just like social cues like you just gotta kind of understand. So
mm,
it's I'm still developing that technique and that skill to like be able to be like in the middle of a match or something like that and then understand like
mm.
where we are with the crowd and how we're
Hey,
gonna do
not
things.
not to interrupt, but like just because it popped in my head, the the other worst thing going back to like the kind of like people just kind of like interrupting like in like kind of like in the locker room, just like conversation, like topic or whatever. But like the worst is when you're like, say if you like haven't seen like a friend for like a long time, like the locker room, and you're just like, say it's like you guys kind of like, not like off in private, but you're like in the locker room, but it's like you and your friends just like talking. But there's someone you see kind of like hovering, just and you can tell they're just like waiting to like jump in the conversation and just like find that opportunity. And like so like you can tell they're there, but like you're talking to your friend and like then like that moment comes where that person just kind of like just jumps in the conversation and then like no one kind of like acknowledges it and you go back and then they still keep trying. It's like, oh, it's like
It's the
because then you want to be
worst.
nice and not be like, hey, like stop talking to us, but like it's just like, hey, also like we're clearly having a 1 and 2 conversation here. So and things like that. It's like, yeah. But it's like I'm a very easygoing person, so I don't like take offense to it. I get like sometimes people are just like excited and like want to talk.
It's funny though, cause like, so my daughter does that. Like,
Mm.
she just waits to, like, interject her point when I'm talking to my wife, and so, like, every once in a while like, I found this funny ass meme, and I use it all the time now with her. So I'll be in the middle of a conversation with my wife, and I see my daughters just sitting off to the side. And I'm like, listen, this is an A-B conversation. See
Yeah.
your way out before D jumps E and F's you up like a G.
That's good.
She's like,
That's
I
good.
hate you say this to me every time, Dad. I was like, yeah. So it tells you
That-
where you're at in
that's
this
true.
conversation. Just go sit down. Be
Mhm.
fine with you.
That's a good one.
Hey, so we're gonna jump into the best part of this podcast, right? The 3 Count Podcast, and that is the 3 Count Podcast 10 count questions. Here's how it works, Mr. Cheeseburger. I'm gonna fire off 10 questions at you, rapid fast. Whatever your answer is, that's your answer. All right, so
Okay.
I'm gonna put on an imaginary timer for added pressure. Bing! And in the words of my favorite commentator, Mike Goldberg, here we go. SmackDown or Raw?
SmackDown.
Favorite movie?
Probably either Inglorious Bastards or Superbad.
Nice. I love both those movies. Apple or Android?
Oh, always Apple. I don't mess with the green bubbles, man.
Favorite actor?
Oh God, favorite actor. Samuel L. Jackson.
Love it. Marvel or DC?
Marvel. Easy.
Favorite cartoon?
The original Batman or the original Spider-Man, probably those two are like Darkwing Duck.
I love Darkwing Duck.
Yeah, it's underrated. Nobody really talks about Darkwing.
No, the theme song is legendary.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Twitter or X? What do you call it?
Always Twitter. It will always be Twitter. There's gonna be a whole generation of kids growing up calling it X, and it just bothers me.
I can't
Well,
wait.
Twitter will probably be gone by the time this generation grows up. So,
Maybe. Favorite podcast?
God, I Talk is Jericho is definitely my favorite like interview podcast. There was a movie podcast I listened to that's like really popular called like How Did This Get Made, where they like go over like really bad movies and like have the process of them and like just like funny tidbits about them and everything. That one's always a good one. Another one is called like I haven't listened to it in a while, but it's called like You're Wrong About, where they kind of cover topics and like things that like people just kind of get misinformation about and kind of like reveal like different things about them.
Oh, I like that. I'm gonna have to go check that one out.
Mm.
Nominate one person that you want to see on this podcast.
Mookie Summers.
Bet. I like it. And then last but not least, my favorite question to ask every single person who comes on this show. Favorite curse word?
Oh, the C word. See you next Tuesday. That one because my Australian and UK friends love to use that, but we just can't like. Just Americans are not a big fan of the C word. And like I was talking to my friend like from Britain like the other day at like a wedding, and he was just like, you will say it just like British people will just like say it, and it's just like, oh yeah, like Americans like, oh yeah, forget like Americans like do not like that word.
So it is so funny, right?
The show. Let's say.
So it's so funny because like when we did our 300th episode, we brought Flip Gordon on the show, right?
Mm.
And he had just came back from his tour in England. And so I
Mm.
asked him that same question, and that was the same word that he
Yep.
said too. So I'm like, yo, that's funny that we
Yeah,
did a
it's a
full
good
circle
one.
moment with this.
It is a good one. They use it like as a term of endearment too, which is hilarious.
I know, and that's I have so when I'm not doing this, I'm a personal trainer, and I have a client from England, and whenever I put together a good workout, that's what he calls me.
Mm.
He's like, I don't want to do
Yep.
this anymore.
Oh, yep.
C word, and I'm like,
Yep.
oh, thank you, sir.
They love it.
But those are all my questions I do have for you. So the last thing I need is for you to let our listeners and our viewers know where they can find you.
You can find me on X or Twitter at Cheeseburger ROH. I probably should change that handle at some point, but I refuse to. Just because. You can find me on Instagram at World Famous CB. You can also follow my wrestling school at Worldwide Dojo on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you listen to this, please go subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Worldwide Wrestling Dojo on YouTube. I post drills for my students there. We also have a weekly YouTube show called Captured Lightning that features our students of the dojo. That's been my goal, to get the YouTube channel to 1,000 subscribers next year. So please go watch our channel and subscribe. We have some great matches, some awesome students with a lot of future stars. So please go enjoy that.
Well, he told you where you could find him. He gave you all of his handles. He even told you about his YouTube channel that you should go subscribe to. And, like every great part of a wrestling match, we got to take this home, because this is the 3 Count Podcast, which is now entering. And like I said, I'm your host, Clifford Red Dog Miller, the man that leads you up that mountain called wrestling. But like every good Sherpa, you got to have someone that's been there, done that, and can do it more efficient than you can. That's why it's never about me. It's about who's entering the ring. So who's entering the ring? You see him right there. He is the man, the myth, the legend, the world famous Cheeseburger. And you guys know what to do. Tune into the next episode and be there, or you're legitimately just subscribing to all of our YouTube channel. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on all our social media platforms. Follow us on Spotify. Listen on Amazon Music, or even checking us out on iHeartRadio, or whatever their little jingle thing is. You're doing all that stuff. You're telling your parents about us. You're telling your friends about us. You're telling your pets about us. You're telling your enemies about us, because we love haters too. So you're doing all that stuff, or you're really just kind of waiting for this episode to end, waiting for the outro, and then you're choosing another episode to listen to. Kawaii. What's going on? It is Clifford Red Dog Miller, the man that leads you up that mountain called wrestling. And what we need from you guys is just kind of show some support, right? We want you guys to go to our YouTube channel at the 3 Count Podcast, go on to our Twitch channel, 3 Count Pod, or even our Facebook page, 3 Count Podcast, and just give us a like, follow, subscribe, even give us a comment, right? Do all that cool stuff. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it with your enemies, right? Or you can even come talk to us and just chat us up, right? Find us on Twitter at 3count_pod. Find us on IG and on TikTok at 3 Count Pod. Go ahead and leave us those comments. We want to hear from all of you guys. We're going to keep putting on videos and stuff like that. We want to keep making this content better, so we want your guys' support. Also, if you guys want to, go support us at prowrestlingtees.com/the 3 Count Podcast, or even find us on foryourwear.com. Give us the support. Show us your guys' love, because we want to give it right back to y'all. So, in the meantime, between time, love y'all.